Hello out there, and welcome back to the Gamecock.com podcast, the official podcast of GamecockScoop.com on Rivals. I'm Caleb, joined by Alan, and we're going to try to push through on this Sunday morning just what went wrong yesterday for South Carolina's 36-33 loss to number 16 LSU. Man, there's just like so many different angles to go at, but I think we should start by talking about penalties. I mean, that's the thing that every message board that I read over the last 24 hours, the national discussion on Reddit, where you have some like Clemson and Tennessee fans chiming in saying that South Carolina got jobbed by the refs. And, obviously those are the things getting uploaded because there's a catharsis in talking about all of that. You wrote an article on our site that says South Carolina has nobody to blame. Sorry, I'm getting the full title. It says nobody to blame but itself after LSU collapse. Why don't you tell us what you mean by that? Because I might have a slightly different perspective, although certainly South Carolina, 11 penalties, 123 yards or whatever it was, 3 turnovers, 4 turnovers, 3 turnovers, is not a very like usually if you just see those things in a vacuum, you probably don't think you won that game, but obviously South Carolina had a chance all the way up until the time clicked off the clock.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to start by saying I get why people are frustrated. I get why players are frustrated. I was there. I watched the game just like you guys did. We're going to talk about some of the calls specifically in a little bit. My whole thing, there's just a few points in the game I just look at where, like, I think I texted it to you during the first half. A better team there has LSU buried before halftime, first of all. You threw a pick in the end zone on the second drive. I didn't love the play call. You're already in field goal range. Throw the ball deep to the end zone. I don't know if Jared Brown broke the route off wrong or something, but the ball was kind of outside. He was going inside. That's a mistake. You had a red zone drive up 7-0 that you stalled out on. Didn't move the ball. Kicked another field goal. You had the ball in scoring range right before halftime. Didn't get any points out of that. Lenoris Ellis takes a sack. The one where ended up getting hard on a spot where you just can't take a sack. Your fifth year senior center Vershawn Lee with a false start before 3rd and 2 on a critical fourth quarter possession. Pretty obvious one too. You could see it from the press box. That's not the officials. He jumped. You get the lead on a Rocket Sanders touchdown. You force a fumble. Nussmeier, the ball's hits him in the chest. Get the ball in the red zone with the lead. 3 plays, 0 yards. Rocket Sanders never touches the ball in that series. You kick another field goal. And then the clock management at the end too, playing for a 49-yard field goal on 3rd down. I know you had to burn a timeout because of another one of your mistakes. You didn't get set after the big pass play over the middle. Had to avoid a 10-second runoff. But Shane himself said, hindsight, I would have run another play there. You played a pretty good football game. And I think this is a pretty good football team. You made too many mistakes for me to say that one call by a ref or even 2 calls by a ref are the reason you lost. I just don't think that's the right way to go about this if you're South Carolina.
So the thing I definitely agree with you there is South Carolina still could have won the game despite the refs. But I do think there are some key moments that were just bafflingly bad. Offensive pass interference that's
that was
called
the
on
one I actually
Bennett.
had. That was the worst one.
Well, it's the one that the announcers were like still talking about 5 plays later on the broadcast
I didn't have the
too.
sound
They
in
were
the stadium, but
yeah, no, literally. I think there was a missed late hit call on maybe Robbie Ashford or Rocket Sanders or something a couple plays later, and Herb Street's like, I understand why the fans are booing because they missed the call before this on offensive.
Oh, that was the OPI, I think, because like the whole rest of the series they were booing. That's
right.
Ashford hits a deep ball to Campbell. It was like 40-something yards. And then Mazio Bennett's called for OPI like further up the field. And to me, that was the worst call of the game. Like, I thought that was worse than the one that's going viral on Kennard. Because I've watched it a couple of times. I don't really know what Mazio Bennett did wrong there.
No, he didn't. I mean, they made a little bit of contact together, but it wasn't like he pushed off or anything. It was weird.
We're going to talk about the Kennard one in a second, but that was the worst one, I thought. Like, if you're going to be mad about a call, I think that one took a big play off the board at a spot at a critical point in the game.
Yeah, right. That's fourth quarter. If you complete that pass, you're probably driving to score again, at least a field goal. definitely to break some more clock off. And instead, 2 plays later, you have to punt because you're now 2nd and 15 or whatever it was instead of 1st and 10, 40-yard field. So that you say the Kyle Kennard thing doesn't bother you as much. To me, that was like the softest call I've ever seen. Like I saw the replay so many times, and the reason it's going viral. Like Kyle Kennard basically stood there and pushed with both hands and pushed him down, and then Nussmeier acted like he died. It was insane. Like I understand that you have to protect people on blindside blocks. I understand that the quarterback's going to get even more scrutiny for that. But it's not like he like lowered his shoulder and took his head off. He literally pushed him down. I don't know. That was
my
tough.
question though with the Kennard with that one. I posted a screenshot. People didn't like it. Whatever. Like I get there's your instinct in that spot. The ball gets picked is to make a block on anybody. But like Nussmeier's inside the numbers. He's at least 15, 20 yards away from Eamon Is Nussmeier going to win a foot race against Nick Eamon and make a tag? Is this DK Metcalf in the NFL? Like, I get the idea that you can put a hit on the quarterback, you can make a block, but like, you also, and Shane said this post game, you have to know the one guy in that spot is the quarterback. The refs are looking for the quarterback. And I do think, for what it's worth, and it doesn't make anybody feel better, if Kyle Kennard throws that exact block on any of the other 10 LSU players, we're not talking about this because the refs don't flag it. But he did it on a quarterback, and there's always a chance that's going to get called.
Yeah, and again, maybe not as egregious as the offensive pass interference. I could see where you could at least make an argument for that one or whatever. But
it took points off the board. I get that. That's
points off the board in a critical time. Right? There's like 7 minutes left in the game or something at that point.
Less than that. It was like 5.5, I think.
And at that point, you go up 42-29. I mean,
it's probably over. Yeah.
So I think that's why it feels the most critical. I think that's why Nick Eamon said bullshit or on Twitter. I think you said he said something on Instagram too. And yeah, I mean, we can argue about whether or not that is anything or whether or not like your senior or junior leader on defense should be doing that. But I also understand the frustration, and I understand the catharsis of just at least acknowledging that, especially when he's the one that makes what would have been the game deciding play, and then it gets called back. So I don't know. I'll be the voice of understanding the fan base's frustration here, while also completely understanding what you're saying. Like the game was still there. There were still too many self-inflicted wounds that actually were done by South Carolina in key moments to walk away from this game. I mean, if we want to start to transition to some of those on the last drive. I got a
couple more, just things I meant to say in the first, just mistakes. You've had, this is something they got, I know it's part of RPOs, but you've had 5 illegal man downfield penalties in 3 games now, and 2 of them have taken points off the board directly. The 2-point conversion play that Ashford, actually makes a really nice play. It scrambles out, finds a receiver, lineman down. There's only 3 yards of space there, and he was more than 2 down. You know what I mean? So, and then 4th and 3 for LSU, 2 minutes to go. Kyle Kennard jumps off sides, gives him a free play. They've got the first down before the ball's even snapped, basically. That's 2 more. I didn't even I'm listing mistakes in the first segment there, and I didn't even think of those 2 till now, but that's 2 more pretty big points in the game, I thought.
Yeah, the Kennard one was one I wrote about in the Rapid Reaction, which you can find on GamecockScoop.com. And the way I started that was like, I wish I could list all the things that under self-inflicted wounds, because that was the title of the subheading or whatever. But I mentioned the Kennard block, which I think was a techie call, but it was still, you could argue it. And then the Kennard offsides on 4th and 3. Not to call out Kennard, by the way, he had an incredible game in so many other ways.
Second half against a really good offensive line.
Should have had another that would have led to another pick 6, but they called a horse collar on him. That one, I think it's a soft rule. Like, I think it's dumb because there's a difference between someone streaking down the sideline and you horse collaring them, and then like you're stopping their forward momentum, and you're much more likely to cause an injury versus a quarterback that's staying in the box and you're just trying to reach out and grab anything you can. And a horse collar. And before this year, the rule was if they're in the tackle box doesn't count as a horse collar. But apparently the rule has changed. And technically, by the letter of the law, you could have called that a horse collar, even though he didn't grab like the actual horse collar. He grabbed jersey. From what I read, apparently that followed the rule of law, but still, that's another one of those just like little moments where the floor gets tilted a little bit this way, and South Carolina's got a little bit more of an uphill that they have to walk. I think enough of those accumulated throughout the game that ultimately it broke you, but. I mean, like we've said, you still had a moment. I mean, you still had a chance to tie the game as the clock expired. And you talked a little bit, and I agree. And I feel like we're jumping around a lot because there were so many.
Yeah.
Of course, there'd be in a game like this, but there's so many of these moments where you're just like, one little thing goes the other way, and we're talking about a completely different story today.
Let's talk about the actual football because you got a comment. Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah. ACoop73 on YouTube says the horse collar call is bogus too. He grabbed his jersey. He did, and I agree. In real time, I thought that's not a horse collar. I still don't think it should be a horse collar, but apparently by the rule of law, in the new ruling, that the call was correct, even if it's like a little bit of a subjective thing. I don't think it should be. I mean, it's football. Like sometimes you're gonna. I don't whatever. I don't want to go on my old man yells at cloud rant about how soft football is getting at times, but especially if you're the quarterback, which we saw in both of those plays, how overprotected Garrett Nussmeier was. Sorry, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, we spent 12 minutes on kind of the self-inflicted wounds and the refereeing, but there wasn't a lot of actual football that happened yesterday. I guess maybe the place to start for me is South Carolina's running game got going. Rocket Sanders broke a long one. Laura Sellers broke a long one. What did you think of the offense overall? And I think I know the answer to this, but are you more encouraged about the rest of the schedule after watching what you did offensively yesterday?
Yeah, so we got 41 carries for 243 yards rushing. Obviously, that 41 carries number is probably a little higher than it would have been had Lenore Sellers not gotten hurt. And maybe his health is one of the biggest is on how I answer the question that you just asked. Yes, I feel like you probably have a better shot than you thought you did. I don't think that there's really a game on the schedule that you should feel is hopeless. I mean, going to Tuscaloosa is going to be really tough. Ole Miss's offense still looks really good, but you at least get them home. Who knows? We saw yesterday Georgia beat Kentucky by 1 point after you just boat race Kentucky. I mean, obviously you can't do the whole rule of thirds thing there or whatever, but I do think that the league in general has more parity than we expected going in, and I think South Carolina is in the mix of all of that parity. But I do think we saw that the offense gets a lot more one-dimensional without Sellers in there. I think he probably could have gone and then maybe a little bit more passing game, but it became very apparent on that drive he tried to come back to in the second half that LSU did not respect the zone read at all. Pretty much all of your run game is based on those zone read concepts. And when they can totally just key on the running back, no matter what, you kind of hammering your running game. So I understood putting Ashford in. I think they should have. I mean, obviously hindsight's 2020, right? But I think you wasted your first 3 drives of the second half trying to figure out which way you were going to go with that. Once you finally did commit to Ashford, the offense still worked pretty well because, again, Ashford's a threat to run in the zone read. I thought the offensive line had their best game of the season by far. If they can continue to hold up like that, you get Sellers back, which – we haven't talked about it yet, but you have Akron coming up. Maybe you sit him no matter what, because I think you can win that game without him. Then you have a bye week before you hit that
21
tough
days
stretch.
before you'd have to play another SEC game now, or I guess 20 now, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously we'll see how all of that goes, how bad the injury is and all of that. But to answer your initial question, yes, I have more confidence in the offense as long as he is healthy. What about you?
Yeah, I think you saw kind of the idea for this offense, right? The running game, the ground and pound stuff we've talked about. Not just a running game, but a running game you think could have been pretty explosive. I mean, we talked about the 2 long runs, the Rocket one, and Lenore Sellers takes a 75-yard touchdown late in the first half. But I mean, even beyond that, right? Like Rocket had an 11-yard run on that first drive, looked pretty good. He had a 27-yard run on the first drive as well. I'm thinking of another scramble Sellers had that I think got 13 yards. And on the last drive of the game, like Robbie Ashford, I mean, he had the one pass play, but two of the biggest chunks were Ashford running the ball himself. Like, I think you saw what this offense is trying to do with some of these concepts. That being said, I agree with you. I guess my thing is like, can Robbie Ashford run the offense or not? Because you kind of saw it on the last drive. You got him in a field goal range. You gave him a chance. He took a lot of responsibility for Herrera's miss, by the way, at the end. He's saying he should have got it closer, didn't need to take the sack. But he did complete a pass over the middle. He made a pretty good throw to Campbell on the play that got called back for the Bazio OPI that we already talked about. I guess I don't think the confidence level in Robbie Ashford is maybe where it needs to. I get it. It's a backup quarterback. I do. But like against a defense that, let's be honest, isn't great, you shrunk the playbook a little bit too much, maybe is what I'm trying to say. I know you're going to shrink it a little bit when you lose your starting quarterback, but he attempted 4 passes the entire second half, and one of those on the last drive where you just kind of didn't have a choice. Like, I understand shrinking your playbook, but at a certain point, you did become completely one-dimensional.
Yeah, and that goes back to those first 3 drives that I feel like were wasted too, and you let LSU get back into the game during those first 3 drives. I do think eventually you did kind of open up the playbook through that middle section, and we saw him complete a couple passes. He completed that deep pass to Delavion Campbell or Delvon Campbell. That got called back. He was 2 for 4 otherwise. Didn't really put the ball in danger too much. So, yeah, I think you got to just trust. When he's in there, you got to trust pretty much the full offense, even if you acknowledge going in that maybe your completion percentage is going to go down a little bit. And then on the final drive, again, hindsight's 2020. I get that you felt like you got in field goal position. You had 20 seconds and a timeout left, and you didn't want to back and pass and potentially get sacked, which knocks you out of field goal position, and it had happened already earlier in the game. You didn't want to risk a false start or hold penalty, which pushes you out of field goal position. But I also think you maybe went a little too conservative there, because if you move the ball 10 more yards forward, then, maybe we're talking about a different result, or maybe the game's still going now.
Do you think, and this goes back to the self-inflicted wounds, but just, I mean, you're not Shane Beamer, but put your Shane Beamer hat on. Do you think if without the false start, the 10-second runoff where you had to burn a timeout, if there's 2 timeouts in Shane's pocket instead of 1 there, do you think they try to push the ball a little bit more, or do you think they were just set on, we just got to get this thing into field goal range and trust Alex to make it?
I think probably, because I think with just the 1, you're making sure that at the very least you have you can stop the clock one more time if you need to, and set up for the field goal. But still, you left the 1 on the table. Like you had 12 seconds at the end of the last play that you just run down before you called it, right? You could have run at least 1 more play,
so
on 4th down, whatever. But again, then you are opening up the risk to let the refs get involved, which at that point I understand that they didn't want to them any more ammunition or anything at that point in the game. And you run the risk of Ashford holding the ball too long or something and getting sacked. And
so Rocky, I'm looking at this again here. I'm just trying to set up. Rocket runs the ball on 2nd and 10 for a yard. That moves the ball to the 31. It's 3rd and 9. At that moment, there's 18 seconds left. You have 1 timeout. What they ended up doing is taking that clock down to 5 seconds, whatever. Use the last timeout, kick on 3rd down. Obviously, if you want to run another play, you got to call the timeout right there. So then you're running a play with no timeouts. Running the ball's out of the question. You don't have enough time to get the field goal unit on the field. So it has to be a drop back pass on 3rd and 9. It's got to be something to the boundary or past the sticks. You need to get the clock stopped. And I maybe that just kind of says what you think of, again, backup quarterback, I know, but you not trust Robbie Ashford, who's played a lot of football. He's been around the SEC a long time, to make a good decision there, to get the ball to the boundary, to get the ball, throw the ball away if he has to get the ball past the sticks. Maybe the better way to ask that is, do you trust Alex Herrera on a career-long field goal more than you trust Robbie Ashford to make a decision where there's 18 seconds left and he pretty much just has to make sure he doesn't lose yards and the clock stops?
I mean, I think our answer.
Got the answer, yeah. But
yeah. Yeah. To me, the play before that is the one that actually sets up that conundrum that you just discussed. Why are you
second and 10 run up the middle.
Sanders directly up the middle on 2nd and 10 when you only have that one timeout?
Maybe second down should have been the pass play, and it's an incomplete. You stop anyway, and then third down you run rocket. Maybe that's the way you should have gone about that.
Or even if you're gonna run, then you need to have 2 plays ready to go. So go line up and run your next play as soon as you're there. So especially you had a timeout right before that, right? So I don't know. Yeah, some clock management stuff. To be honest, Shane Beamer in his time at South Carolina, and I had this thought mid-game. I was like, we're going to find out about his end-of-game scenarios. We really haven't seen it too much. We haven't had to see it too much. Even in the upset wins that he's had in his time here, it hasn't really come down to the final seconds like that. So, that's something that you learn from with experience, and I don't think he's had a ton of experience in those scenarios. Still, at the end of the day, I think you should have won this game. I think you put that in your article, which is, is there something positive to glean from the fact that you are so frustrated today? Most people, when the thing kicked off yesterday, probably didn't think that this was in the cards at all. Of course, with the way the game went, where went up 17-0, went up 24-10, you start to build up that hope. Some of the calls that we've already talked about that go the wrong way add to the frustration. But I mean, can we take any sort of moral victory, which I know South Carolina fans are probably pretty tired of, if they've been South Carolina fans for any length of time? But I don't know. You asked me about the rest of the schedule. You feel this team now after seeing them through 3 games, if we balance out the rest of the schedule?
Moral victory, no. It's college football. It's the SEC. You were up 17. I just don't think that's there. I do, like I said earlier, I think this is a pretty good football team. I think that's why you should be frustrated today if you're a South Carolina fan, because you are a pretty good football team. You did have a game won. You should be 3-0 right now. It kind of transitioned me to one of my other points. And I think people are going to not jump off, but maybe not feel as good about this D-line. You gave up, or this defense as a whole, you gave up 36 points. You gave up, have a box score up here, 400 and some odd yards. You're playing again, I said on the Wednesday show or whenever we recorded the pregame, that's the best offensive line you're going to face all year. Maybe not the best team, but the best offensive line you're going to face all year, in my opinion. You still 6 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. You were after Nussmeier all day. 3 quarterback hits, obviously forced the turnovers. Weirdly, maybe not more than Kentucky, but almost as validated by this thought that the D-line's pretty good yesterday than it was at Kentucky, just because I think Kentucky's offensive line's not very good, and this is a very, very good one for LSU. Like, the way you rushed the passer yesterday against 2 NFL tackles is going to hold up against almost anybody you face. It was kind of one of my thoughts. And you saw it got to a point where LSU was moving Nussmeier out of the pocket pretty much every single play because they knew they just couldn't block those ends. And that, to answer your first question, yeah, I look at the rest of the schedule and it's like, I'll be honest, I think Alabama and Ole Miss are just a bridge too far. I do. But like every other game on the schedule, like I'm starting to reevaluate the Oklahoma trip, right? Oklahoma had another shaky win yesterday. It was a 5-point game in the 4th quarter against Tulane. Why can't you go to Norman if your defense travels and play well and win that game? A&M wins yesterday, but it's at Florida, kind of a deadbeat Florida team right now. I don't think A&M's unwinnable here. Vandy lose yesterday to Georgia State. Missouri in a dogfight with Boston College yesterday. Clemson had a bye yesterday, but I think we kind of know what they are right now at 1-1. Like, I'm not saying you're going to win all those games, and don't quote me on that, but like, yeah, why can't you be in at least every game, maybe except Ole Miss and Alabama?
I think you at least have more in the toss-up category than you did before the season started.
Absolutely. That's a better way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, a couple things on the D-line. I mean, I was praising them big time in the first half with good reason. Like you said, they were going up against an elite LSU offensive line, probably one of the best that you're going to see all year, and we're wreaking havoc. Like the point that LSU had to make some major adjustments in the way that they ran their offense to slow them down. I thought we talked about it beforehand. I thought Clayton White had a good feel for when to blitz and when to not, especially in the first half. You hit some pretty key moments where you sent 5 or 6 guys and pressured at the right time. As far as the second half goes, I don't really think you placed it at the feet of the defense. They had, a goal line stand. They had another stop on another turnover on downs. They did everything that they could in the fourth half, but the second half, fourth quarter. But with the game on the line, you did ultimately let them drive down and score. You, like we already talked about, you had that opportunity where you held them to a 4th and 3, and then you jump off sides and give it a 3 down. I do want to point out that in the second half alone, LSU won the time of possession by almost 7 minutes.
Yeah.
LSU ran 42 plays to South Carolina's 24 plays. So even though I do think you have much improved depth on the South Carolina defense, eventually, especially in that humid day, we saw even more cramp up a few times. You ran out of gas, and you didn't have the offensive firepower. Even the drives the offense score on in the second half, a lot of them were really quick plays. And ultimately, I think, the time of possession started to weigh heavy there. I don't know. Back to what you were saying a second ago, better days ahead, I think. Certainly have to feel better after three weeks than you did after the first week of the season.
Yeah, no question about that. We didn't even mention it yet on the depth point, but I'm glad you brought it up. TJ Sanders went down pretty early in the second half with a foot injury. Beamer said he thinks he should be fine. Maybe that's another one where you just don't risk it against Akron. You do have depth in that room, but you lost a body in the middle of the field there. And I think, I'm not going to say you win the game if TJ Sanders plays the last quarter and a half, but it didn't help. So that's one to point out. It's tough. You're sick if you're a South Carolina fan. You had game day here. You had the 17-0 lead. We haven't even mentioned the block punt yet. Mo Brown gets up, basically somersaults, blocks the punt like with his legs. Buddy Mack falls on it. Rocket scores in the next play. I thought it's hard to say special teams was good when you missed the game-tying field goal as time expired, but you blocked the punt. Juju McDowell had some wiggle in the return game again, I thought. You were close to blocking a couple other punts. LSU's return game never got going, really. I just going further to the point that, I think this is a pretty good team. I think you feel, if you just kind of grading out yesterday, you feel pretty good about special teams, pretty good about the D-line, O-line's best game of the year, Rockets' best game of the year. And all of that in a loss is very frustrating if you're a South Carolina fan. I get it.
Yeah, I mean, we were texting after. I also was texting my dad after, who has been a South Carolina fan for 61 years now. And it's just a gut punch, right? Like you had everything on the table. You had the opportunity on a national stage to knock off a ranked team, to start 3-0 for the first time in 12 years. To do it at home with a crowd that was literally crowding the hedges, ready to rush the field.
Yeah, that was tough.
And you'd come up just short. And I think, again, we've gone over it 15 times or whatever, but the way that you come up short, with some of it being seemingly out of your hands, in the ref's hands or whatever, hurts a lot. But also there were moments for you to kind of take it that you didn't as well. So I think you're lucky where this fell on the schedule, because now you have Akron in a bye week to recover. Whereas if you had it immediately to go into another SEC match next week, I think this might be one that lingers a little bit. We already talked about some of the players on social media and whatever. And anyone that's ever played a team sport has probably had a loss like this, and you know how it can like emotionally mess with you for a little while.
Yeah. So on that point, just getting into next week a little bit, it's Akron coming in. Akron's 1-2. I don't even need to break down Akron. I think we know it's South Carolina. That point spread did come out today, and it's probably going to start with a 3 or a 4. Is there anything? I guess we'll talk about it more during the week. Is there anything you can flush from LSU by beating Akron by 40 points? You know what I mean? Like, is next week enough where you can just say, okay, win the game by a lot of points, go into a bye 3-1, or is there something else you kind of need to see to feel like, okay, they've moved on, LSU's behind them, ready to go attack the SEC schedule?
I mean, I think the biggest question is purely for me just is Lenore Sellers healthy or not? That's pretty much all I'm looking for next week. And if he's not, hopefully we get a sort of accurate timeline.
Yeah, we're not going to get injury reports this week because it's not an SEC game, so it's going to have to just come from the staff and the pressers and the radio show.
Yes, no injury report, like no formal one because it's not a SEC game. Then you have a bye week afterwards, so it might be a long time before we get a formal report on, which is a little frustrating. But you know, if he comes out and he plays and he looks good, then question answered. But if he doesn't, then there's gonna be some anxiety for a few weeks, I think. And if he does not play, counterpoint, I guess, can you start to open up the offense a little bit further with a Robbie Ashford is something that I would be looking for in that game, because if you're going to need him down the stretch, you're going to need to have the ability to run your full offense.
That's kind of why it's so hard to tell your starting quarterback if he's healthy to not play, if Norris is ready to go. And we don't know if he is going to be yet, obviously, but that is kind of, you talk about what can you accomplish against Akron, right? In a game where, like I said, you're going to be favored by at least 30 points, probably more than that. I don't know if you saw Akron in a dogfight with Colgate yesterday. Ended up winning by 11, but it was a one-score game in the fourth quarter. Yeah, I think it's what are you trying to learn about yourself? What can you do offensively? You're probably not going to show a lot against Akron with Ole Miss next, but yeah, I think that's a very good point that we can get into more during the week. But actually trying to get Robbie Ashford comfortable, getting Robbie Ashford into some different situations, moving him around a little bit. That might be all you can accomplish in what's probably going to be the least interesting home game on your schedule, or maybe game period. So I would agree with that. But can you tell Norris not to play if he's healthy is kind of the thing. Just if he's your guy, he's your guy, right? Maybe he only plays a half or whatever, but I think you hit the nail on the head. That's the question this week.
Yeah, I mean, and if he is healthy, I do think you want to roll him out there and it's still just his fourth start, You still want to let him continue to get more and more comfortable. I think we've seen him get more comfortable. That is something that I noted in our live chat on GamecockScoop.com yesterday was even with the interception in the end zone or whatever, he looked a lot more poised yesterday than he the first 2 weeks, I thought. Until he ultimately, went down with the injury. But he had the fumble, but kind of instant karma situation, which sometimes happens on a football field. The guy that caused the fumble is the same guy he juked on the 70-yard touchdown. Like the
I didn't
next
even
play.
notice that. Good call.
Yeah. So, I think everything that we said about him in the offseason seems to be true. Got the tools. He's a gamer. I mean, that sequence right there is the sort of mindset you have to have to be that extra level, right? You give up a mistake, but then you immediately make up for it on the next play. But if he's not healthy, you can't run your full offense, which we saw in those first couple of sequences to start the second half. And, those ended up being pretty critical yesterday.
Yeah, that's about all I had on the game. I guess if you're a South Carolina fan, you're down. I get it. It sucks. You're not waking up Florida, and you're not waking up Mississippi State. So keep your head up, guys. Read GamecockTube.com. It could always be worse.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it in your post-game article, but South Carolina was picked to finish 13th in the SEC, right around those teams that you just mentioned. And I think thus far in the season, they've proven that they belong a tier above that at the very least. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's like a bye week activity. We can redo power rankings or whatever. You're not 13th anymore. I don't know where you are. You have to give it some more thought, but you're definitely not there.
Yeah, kind of. We'll do it more in depth on the bye week, but I'm just like kind of looking around a little bit.
Arkansas
I
wobbled
think
yesterday
Alabama.
with UAB. That was a one-score game in the fourth quarter too.
Yeah, I think Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss,
Oh,
maybe the
Tennessee.
top tier.
Did you see what Josh Heupel
um,
did yesterday with a 30-0 lead in the first quarter?
I mean, I know that they won 71-0, but no,
He
I
did an
didn't watch any
onside
of that
kick
game.
up 30 in the first quarter and recovered it.
I mean, I guess
Just
use
diabolical.
use it to work on things that you only get to work on in practice usually. But yeah, I guess I left Texas out too. So there's like
Yeah,
5
they look pretty
teams ahead
good.
of you. I guess you have to put LSU ahead of you because of the way the game ended. Missouri's probably in the next year, and you're probably in that next year. A&M, yeah, I don't know. There's a whole smattering after those first 5 teams that I think you're
Yeah,
solidly
I would
somewhere
agree
in the
with
mix.
that. And really, you play a lot of those teams,
Um,
right? In that middle, you play A&M. You just mentioned you play Missouri. You get both those games at home. Oklahoma's a road game, but does anybody think Oklahoma's unwinnable right now with what Oklahoma's done the first 3 weeks? Because I don't.
I think that's going to be a 13-12 game,
Yeah,
like
I do too.
Georgia suffered through yesterday. It's going to be a dogfight for sure. Um, anyway, we will talk a lot more on Thursday about Akron and also what we know about Lenora Sellers' health and kind of how the season's shaping up from here. At the end of the day, you're 2-1. This is still one of the better starts that you've had in the Shane Beamer era. I still think you have a lot of your goals ahead of you. I think you got to, give me win here. We talked about in the offseason, if you come out of these first 4 games 3-1, you're feeling pretty good. You still have most of your goals ahead of you. I know you're frustrated because it looked for most of the game yesterday like you're going to end up 4-0 basically to start this off. So it feels like something was taken away from you. But if we reset our mindset to the way we were looking in the offseason, I think we're on pace for where you should be.
I would agree with that completely. And as long as you handle your business next week, you're going to get 14 days to gear up for what should be a pretty interesting, I'll just put it that way, home game against Ole Miss.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll probably start to talk about that the next 3 weeks or whatever. But very, very dangerous offense. But they definitely haven't played a defense like South Carolina has either. So, and Williams-Brice is always a tough place to play, as we
Might be a
saw.
night game. It's in the flex, so
Yeah.
it could be either 3:30 or at night. We won't know until after the Akron game, but I think you're hoping that's a night game if you're South Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, by all accounts, ESPN had time yesterday, so it wouldn't surprise me if they send a nice crew for that one too.
Yeah.
All right, we will be back on Thursday with the GamecockScoop.com podcast. You can check out all of our articles in the meantime on GamecockScoop.com. We'll see you.